Here's my cat. Her name is Kiki. I'm sure she feels forced to be here, like many of you. Oh. Welcome back, guys, to another YouTube lesson presented by your teacher, Mr. Rodriguez. In this lesson, we are going to look at the presidency of Thomas Jefferson. Not the entire presidency, but we're going to look at the beginning. Maybe kind of the underlying beliefs of President Jefferson with regards to how government should run and how the economy should run. We're also going to look at the Supreme Court during Thomas Jefferson's presidency, and in particular, Chief Justice John Marshall. Before we begin, you need to read pages 196 to 200 in your MyWorld Interactive textbook. These are the pages. Look at them. They are so beautiful. Read these pages. And if you haven't already, make sure you take the Thomas Jefferson quiz, which is located in your Google Classroom. President Thomas Jefferson, look at this guy, was the third president of the United States after Presidents Washington and Adams. He was elected in the year 1800 in a controversial and hotly contested election between himself, John Adams, and Aaron Burr. When Jefferson was elected, there was a lot of concern, especially amongst the Federalists, that one, he would punish them politically. Two, that he would bring about a lot of the same revolutionary chaos that was happening in France, because Jefferson was a huge supporter of the French Revolution. And for those of you who don't know, the French Revolution ended quite violently. One might say people were losing their heads over it, quite literally. Even the people who started and led the revolution, people like Robespierre, who ended up getting their heads chopped off. So people were rightly concerned that Thomas Jefferson, who supported this bloody revolution, would maybe try to inspire another one here at home. But Jefferson tried to calm those fears by saying, we're all Republicans and we are all Federalists. He wanted to make sure right off the bat that people understood he would protect the rights and the voices of the minority political party. In this case, the minority being the Federalists. Now, you have to understand that Thomas Jefferson was a revolutionary. He was someone who promoted small rural agrarian, that means agricultural communities. He favored an agricultural economy, right, over Hamilton's trade and manufacturing economy. And he also opposed big national governments, such as the one that the Federalist Party, in particular Hamilton, proposed. So one of President Jefferson's tasks right off the bat was to start scaling down government, to start making government smaller. In his view, all the government should do is protect your rights. Other than that, the government should be hands off. So, to that end, one of the things he did was cut the budgets for the Army and for the Navy. He didn't want to have a large standing army, like many of the more imperial governments in Europe had, right? He thought that a standing army would be a threat to the people, a threat to our rights, our freedom. One of the other things he did was he did not renew the Alien and Sedition Acts, right? So he let that expire. He went as far as to pardon and release from prison all of those who had been jailed under the Sedition Acts. And then he restored the previous immigration laws that would allow immigrants to become citizens more quickly. However, in the next lesson and in the next chapter of your book, we'll see where Jefferson starts to kind of compromise on this idea of small government. In terms of the economy, Jefferson was motivated and inspired by an Enlightenment thinker from Scotland, right? An economist by the name of Adam Smith. Adam Smith promoted the idea of laissez-faire, which is a fancy French term meaning let do, hands off, right? Hands free. In other words, the government should play no role, little to no role, in the management of the U.S. economy. Jefferson, inspired by Adam Smith, believed that people free to compete in the market, to buy or sell, free from government involvement, would make smart, wise decisions. And that would benefit the wealthy, but it would also benefit the poor, the workers. Now contrast this with Hamilton and other Federalists who believed that the government should play a role in the economy, that the government should promote manufacturing and trade as a way to promote the economy. If you recall, Washington's Secretary of the Treasury was Alexander Hamilton. However, Thomas Jefferson picked a guy named Albert Gallatin to be his Secretary of the Treasury. Now, Gallatin came in to reduce the debt and to reduce the size of the nation's budget. However, one thing that Gallatin decided to keep from Alexander Hamilton was the Bank of the United States. Even though Jefferson hated this and wanted to get rid of it, he was convinced by Gallatin, his Secretary of the Treasury, to keep it. And another thing they continued to do, which was, again, an idea from Hamilton during the presidency of Washington, was to continue paying off the debts, the Revolutionary War debts of the states. And Jefferson was also someone who supported the people's desire to have low taxes or fewer taxes. One thing he did was to eliminate the unpopular whiskey tax. So we see in government and in the economy, President Jefferson wanting to reduce the size of the government and to reduce the government's involvement in the economy, whether it's the government's budget, taxes, or just paying for defense, as in the Army or the Navy. However, the Federalist Party didn't completely lose all power in the government. They still had some power in the courts. So even though John Adams lost the 1800 election, he was still able to, at the very last minute, to put as many Federalists as possible into the courts. And one of the people he put into place was John Marshall, who he appointed as the Chief Justice, like the leader of the Supreme Court. John Marshall was a very strong Federalist who believed that the courts didn't have equal power to the other two branches of government, Congress or the executive branch. So he sought to use his position as Chief Justice to strengthen the power of the judicial branch. So President Adams' last-minute attempt to influence the courts by filling them with Federalists upset Jefferson, and Jefferson ended up firing about 16 of Adams' appointments. One of the people that weren't placed was a guy by the name of William Marbury. Jefferson and the Democratic Republicans were so upset that Secretary of State James Madison, who was considered the father of the Constitution, did not deliver the confirmation papers to Marbury. So, because of a law called the Judiciary Act of 1789, Marbury was allowed to sue James Madison. Now, when the Supreme Court took up the case, Chief Justice Marshall saw an opportunity here to strengthen the Supreme Court. Upon review of the case, Justice Marshall threw it all out. His reason being that Congress acted unconstitutionally, in other words, against the Constitution, in writing and passing the Judiciary Act of 1789. In other words, it was unconstitutional. And because it was unconstitutional, Marbury had no standing to sue Madison in the first place. So Chief Justice John Marshall effectively created a new power for the Supreme Court, a power called judicial review. That gives the Supreme Court the power to decide whether or not a law passed by Congress and signed by the president is constitutional. Now, President Jefferson was pleased, on the one hand, that the court decided against Marbury and in favor of Madison, but he was quite displeased that the Supreme Court, under Chief Justice Marshall, had, in his view, grabbed at or took on itself a new power. If you look on page 199 at the primary source quote, it says, "The opinion which gives to the judges the right to decide what laws are constitutional and what not only for themselves, but for the legislature and executive, also would make the judiciary a tyrannical branch." That was written by Thomas Jefferson in a letter to Abigail Adams, John Adams's wife, in 1804. So you see, President Jefferson saw that move, the establishment of judicial review, as a tyrannical power grab. And so for the rest of his presidency, Jefferson would make several attempts to defy the courts, to refuse to hand over papers, documents, or even to testify. Despite Jefferson's opposition to judicial review and his opposition to the courts, judicial review stands as one of the cornerstones, one of the pillars of the Supreme Court's power to this day. So that's the end of our video lesson for today. We looked at Thomas Jefferson's small government philosophy. We looked at how he had a laissez-faire, hands-off, or let the people do as they please, hands-off approach to the economy. And we also looked at how the Supreme Court established itself as being more balanced and equal to the other two branches of government because of Chief Justice John Marshall and judicial review. In the next lesson, we'll look more into Thomas Jefferson's presidency, particularly with the Louisiana Purchase. All right, guys, thank you for watching. Don't forget to take that quiz. I will probably turn this video into an ed puzzle, so stay tuned for that. All right, guys, take care, stay home, stay safe, make sure you're continuing to do your work. Summer is not here yet. We are still learning. Take care, tighten up. Or whatever, I don't know. Bye. I still don't know what to do.